Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for our first home buyer webinar. Buying your first home is an exciting milestone, but it can also feel overwhelming. Our goal today is to give you the knowledge and confidence to navigate the process successfully, whether you're looking to buy your first home or looking to support a loved one who is. We're excited to be part of your journey. I'm Caroline Jean-Baptiste, owner of Mortgage Choice in Fortitude Valley and Ashgrove. I've been a broker for well over a decade. I'm a passionate property investor and a reformed spenderholic. Joining me here is Renee, our first home specialist, and Matthew, our experienced and wise financial planner, to guide you through the basics of getting into your first home. We'll walk you through everything from current market trends to financial planning and home loans. Here's what we'll cover: the latest property market trends and what's ahead for 2025, the role of financial planning in your home buying journey, including how to maximise your deposit savings, the role of the mortgage broker and how to secure the right home loan for your situation, and of course, we'll answer your burning questions. Throughout the session, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A icon at the bottom, which is the triangle, circle and square on the bottom right, and we'll tackle them at the end. We've got first home buyer specialist Keely manning the chat. Now, let's dive in. We're going to start with an overview of the current market landscape and have a glimpse at past trends. Understanding where we are now, where the market's heading, will help you make some informed decisions. As you would be aware, it's really recent news. The RBA, or the Reserve Bank of Australia, announced a reduction in the cash rate down to 4.10. This is after 11 increases, taking the interest rate to the highest rate since November 2011. It's just come down 0.25%, which is really positive for all the first home buyers and all the existing home loan owners out there at the moment. Now, the cash rate is important as it guides the price of financial products, namely home loans. When the Reserve Bank or the RBA moves the rate up, your repayments will generally go up. And if it goes down, your repayments go down and your interest rate drops as well, saving you cost on your home loan and in cash flow as well. When interest rates are high, the amount that you can borrow reduces. As they come down, your borrowing capacity, which is how much you can borrow, increases. When the interest rates have been low, the amount that you can borrow increases. And this is why when rates were sitting around 2%, which is just after COVID, many households could borrow much more. This was also a time where a lot of money was in the economy and people were spending, which drove inflation up and the house prices up as well. It also followed the cost of living. That has increased over the last few years, adding to our grocery bills, the cost of electricity, and the general cost of living. I'm sure you've all noticed it. Now, don't stress. I'm getting to the bit where you can buy a house. Now, the recent rate cut means you can likely borrow a little more and enter the market at a higher price. You might have met with a broker or one of us recently, and we would have set a budget for you, and maybe you went away and you thought, oh, I don't really want to buy at that price. I want to buy a little bit higher. Enter the market at a little bit higher price bracket. You may have thought about bringing somebody else in. There's plenty of ways we can do it, but this recent rate drop means you can likely borrow a little bit more. We need to let the rates come through, and that means waiting maybe a week or so that all the servicing calculators and the borrowing capacity officially increases. But it's probably the perfect time to have a meeting again about what your budget looks like. As of January 2025, the national annual growth of home prices sits at 3.8. So that means all of the homes in Australia rose on an average of 3.8% the last financial year. On the other hand, Queensland house prices have increased 10.2% and the unit prices 16.6%. What that means is the house that you might have bought in January 2024, a year ago, for 700,000 would now be on the market for 770,000. It's the same 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom property in the mid to outer suburbs that you could have bought a year ago, but now have to pay $70,000 more. A unit you purchased for 500,000 would now be worth 583,000. Don't despair. This growth is expected to continue, although at a flatter rate. So getting into the market as soon as possible is really important for first-time buyers. Gives you an idea of the historical market trends for the median prices and units in Brisbane. So that's pretty much the middle. For those who can't see it, you could be on a small screen. The graph ranges from 2003 to 2020. 2003 to 2020. It's a period of 17 years. Over that period, house prices doubled. So they went from 300,000 to 600,000. But we've all witnessed what has been the rapid rise to a median value of 979,000 for houses in 2025. So that's a significant increase over a very short period of time, being 4 years. Now, whilst it's important to keep your eye on the market and what's happening on a larger scale, it's far more important just to get into the market where you fit in. And what that really means is buy what you like and where you can afford. If you can only afford a property for 600,000 and maybe it's in Ipswich and you don't really want to live in Ipswich, don't worry about it. Just get into the market at a price point that you can afford, because quite often within 2 to 5 years, you can upgrade into the next property. What you're doing when you get into the market is locking in that home loan value and riding the wave of property increases. So let's say, for example, you bought a property for 500,000 last year. Your loan, maybe it was 500,000, for the sake of ease. So we've got $500,000 loan, and this year that same property is worth 583,000. You have $83,000 in equity, but you have secured it for 500,000. You can later on sell that and upgrade, moving into a better property when your earning increases, or when you partner up, or many other things that can impact your borrowing capacity, like when the rates go down, and you can step by step upgrade into your dream home. Now, the other key takeaway here is the best time to buy a property was yesterday. The next best time to buy a property is today. So if you want to understand a bit more about the market, just give me a shout out. But right now, I'll hand it over to our first home buyer expert, Renee, to take you through some of the incentives for first home buyers and a little bit more about how you can get into your first home sooner.
Hi everyone, so I'm Renee. I have looked after many first home buyers in my 5 years of working here at Mortgage Choice Fortitude Valley and Ash Grove. One of the biggest things that I've been coming across, and especially more so lately, is a lot of clients believing that their first step and the best step in buying a home is going to the bank they already bank with. So although that lender, that bank may know your history, at the end of the day, they're only going to offer you the loans they've got available. This, in most cases, is not always the best option for you. That's where coming to a broker can open up so many other doors and possibilities and potentially get you into that home a lot sooner than if you were to wait for the offer from your existing lender. So with us here at Mortgage Choice Fortitude Valley and Ash Grove, we can look at over 40 different lenders for you. So that allows us to look at different policies. So where you might be a little bit restricted with your existing lender on your employment type or the amount of money you've got saved, and that particular lender, you don't fit their box. We may have a lender on our panel where you do fit that box. We also follow best interest duty. So we are legally obligated to offer you what is best for you and your interests. So although we are paid commissions, we at Mortgage Choice are also paid the exact same regardless of who you choose. So that makes putting your best interest duties completely and so much easy. So don't think that you're not getting the best deal out there. We will walk through you in your meeting, putting strategies in place. So when you sit down with us, whether you have money saved, you don't have money saved, you're working, you're not working, we will go through and get an understanding of your current situation. And then we will put a strategy in place that we will work with you to achieve the goal, whether it be building those savings up, waiting until you're in that job that gets you the home that you're looking for. We will work with you to get there. So in the appointment, we will look at things like setting a purchase price. We will let you know about all the costs that are associated with the purchase of the property, how much of a deposit you'll need. And as everyone's circumstances are unique, it is important that we will tailor it to your needs. And your needs may not be the same as your sister, your brother, your best friend, the neighbour living next door to you. So the things that we do need to take into consideration and things for you to start thinking about before you come and have a chat to us is your income, your commitments, and the commitments are things like your personal loans you've got, your credit cards you might have, your HECS debts, rent you're currently paying. We'll also look at your living expenses. Living expenses will also look a lot more different living at home with mum and dad, where they're probably still buying your groceries and paying the electricity bill, to you being in your own home, but we will cater for you being in your own home. So you will know exactly what sort of costs you're going to be up for outside of the actual home loan repayment. We will make a recommendation to you. So whether that be, hey, great, fantastic news, you are ready to go, this is the lender we're going with and this is the reasons why, or whether we put a strategy in place and we keep in touch on a regular basis. If we're at that point where we're making that recommendation and we're telling you, go and start house shopping, we will look at getting a pre-approval in place for you. A lot of people will often ask me, do I really need that pre-approval though? Our simple answer to that is yes. Although it's not necessary, it's one less thing in the whole potentially confusing stage of buying a home that you have to think about. It also gives you that little bit more confidence when you're going and looking at a property, you know that you can make this offer for this price. It also potentially will give you a little bit more option to make a better looking offer to a seller. So you may not need a finance clause, which we'll delve into a little bit later, as long as someone who already has a pre-approval if you didn't have one. So with us being brokers, as I've already touched on, so we will provide you with the education around buying a home. We will support you every step of the way. And that's not only through this potential meeting, application, and purchase of your first home. We will be there for afterwards as well. We understand that your first home especially can be a very daunting experience as you don't always know what to expect. Don't be scared to ask a question, and don't be scared to ask the question more than once, because your brain can get severely overloaded with the information we give you in that meeting. And if you're anything like myself, you're going to walk away and go, I know she told me that, but I can't quite remember. Ask me again. I don't care. So the first step, we truly believe, is to get the information to make sure you're on the right path. I've had so many people sit in front of me and go, I don't have enough deposit. I don't think I'm ready, but I just wanted to have a chat to you so I know what I need to do to buy my first home. And more times than not, I'm telling them, you've got your deposit, you're ready to go. Here's what we're doing next. So the budget is a big thing that you do probably need to work on the most, especially if you're a little bit younger or older and still enjoying your social life, and spending money in what lenders call the discretionary spending. And the biggest one of that is, let's say, recreation and entertainment. I also like to refer to it as sanity money sometimes. So that's probably the biggest area where you can actually control your money. So that's things like going out, ordering in, getting a takeaway. Gambling's another big one that a lot of people don't realize. The banks do see that. So if you are looking to get ready to buy a home, maybe have a bit of a look through even just the last month of your statement and see exactly where you're spending your money. And if you're at the pub or the casino or sports bet every week, maybe rein it in a little bit so that the bank does know that you've got those good spending habits. So aside from putting in that budget and working everything out, there are a lot of things in the background that first home buyers and even second or third home buyers aren't always aware that will impact their borrowing capacity. Things like your credit file. So a lot of people aren't aware that just by making an inquiry into whether or not you can get a personal loan, whether you take it out or not, a credit card, your postpaid mobile bill, all of these things will impact your credit score, which can in turn impact your potential chances of getting a home loan. The other things that can impact you are circumstances changing. So that can be as simple as changing jobs, taking on that new debt after we've already sort of given you your budget for what you can spend on a home, going out and spending in those sanity money categories after you've got your pre-approval, because lenders can still have a bit of a look at your statements when you want to look at actually finalising it, and stopping saving. Don't stop saving, even when you're looking for a home, because we can always have a look at readjusting that budget. If you find that you've been looking in your budget and you need to increase that a little bit and you've continued to save, there's a good chance that you'll still be able to increase the budget to make that purchase. Now, there are some terminology that I'm bad for doing it. We will slip into from time to time and you'll be like, what does that mean again? So some of the terminology here, and I might get Caroline to help me with some of these so that you don't have to listen to my voice for too long. So LVR, or loan to value ratio, is probably one of the biggest things. And we will go into this a lot more when I start talking to you about some of the schemes that are involved. The LVR, or loan to value ratio, is exactly that. It's the loan amount to the value, to the ratio of the value of your property. Now, in a perfect world, and the old saying, your parents, you might have heard them say you need 20% deposit for your home, which would put you at an 80% loan to value ratio. That avoids the next terminology, LMI, or lender's mortgage insurance. So lender's mortgage insurance, a lot of people aren't aware, is actually an insurance that protects the bank. It does not protect you guys. And it's for if you are going over 80% of the value of the property in a loan amount and you were to potentially default, this insurance can kick in to help protect the lender so they can recoup those costs. Now I might hand to Caroline. She can probably explore, she touched on it a little bit before, but equity.
Sure. So Equity is built up after you purchase the property, or you might even start with a little bit of equity in your home as well. So let's say, for example, you've got a 20% deposit and you borrow 80% of the value of the home. So let's say, for example, you're buying a property for $1 million, just to work with easy numbers. Your loan amount at 80% LVR would be $800,000. So you would already have, once you've settled on that property, $200,000 in equity. You would have had to cover some of the costs. So for the purchase, it would have been maybe $240,000, for example, to cover all the stamp duty and other costs. But if you owe $800,000 and your property's worth $1 million, you have a 20% equity. So $200,000 in equity. This is what is built up as you pay the loan down and the property value increases. And with that equity, you can actually use that to buy another property. That's how you build a portfolio. Do you want me to go on with the other ones, the next two?
Yeah, with principal and interest only.
Lovely. So P&I, you'll see that term a lot when it comes down to choosing the sort of loan that you get. So principal and interest is where you borrow the amount of money. So let's say, for example, $800,000. And when you make a payment, the bank charges the interest, the accumulated interest. So they whack that on. So let's say, for example, it's $3,000 for the month. And then you pay a little bit of the principal. So your repayment, for example, might be $3,500 per month. That's a principal and interest repayment. If we go to interest only, which is generally the preference for property investors, so when they're buying an investment property, so that they can improve their cash flow, they might like to pay an interest only repayment. So out of that $3,500, they might just pay $3,000 because that $800,000 is only the interest component will be paid, but the downside of interest only is that you still owe that same amount 5 years later if you've got a 5-year interest only loan. So in 5 years, you'll still owe $800,000 on an interest only loan. On a principal and interest loan, you might owe $780,000 or less, depending on how quickly you repay the loan. Back to you.
So redraw is the next.
Can I do redraw and offset?
Oh, go for it. Matthew, just step it on in.
And so the reason being is because we have the conversation a lot with redraw and offset. And so one of the key mistakes we find when people have purchased their first house and then they go in to buy their second one is that, redraw facility. So your redraw facility is when you're making payments over and above the minimum principal and interest payment, and you'll see that the amount you can draw back off the loan slowly grows, which is your redraw. So effective way to pay down your mortgage sooner is making those additional repayments because it is going straight onto the principal. Offset works in a similar way, except it's a separate cash account. And then what the bank does is it looks at what additional repayments you've made, but also what the balance of the offset is before it calculates that interest payment. So, and remember, interest is calculated daily and charged at the end of the month. The reason why I wanted to dive in on this one is just, let's say in a couple of weeks' time, we purchased our first house, but our plan is it's not our, dream home. It's our starter, which, as Caroline said, just get in the market. If we plan on turning that into a rental in the future, we want to run an offset account because what will happen is hopefully we're making additional payments, but we want to start filling in that offset account because then we can take that money there and we can use it for the deposit on our next house that we plan on living in. And then we've got this good amount of debt left, what's going to become our new investment property. If you didn't have an offset account and you're just pumping it into the loan and you've got this massive amount of redraw, if you go to pull the redraw out and use that as a deposit for your house that you want to live in, the ATA goes, nah, this is actually constitutes a new loan and it is not for investment purposes. Therefore, it's not tax deductible. And we want to have as much tax deductible debt as always. And I'm always torn because I'm helping people get into the market for the first time. And I'm also helping people grow massive property portfolios, which is making it harder for you guys to get in, which is why I'm here, to try and save grace. I don't know what COS stands for, so someone's going to have to take over.
We can take over. And as I said earlier, brain overload. These are all things that we do recap in the meeting that we have with you. So once we know your whole situation, we work out which of those are the best suited to you as well. So it's not something that you need to sort of put too much thought into now, but we will definitely go over it and make sure that we're setting it up the right way for current goals and future goals. Now, the COS, however you want to call it, is your contract of sale. So that is what you will get once you have actually found a property, made an offer on it, and it's been accepted. We will just shorten it to COS, because everybody shortens everything these days. So when you hear us talk about that, that's your contract of sale on the property you're buying. Pre-approval is the application at a not fully approved and the bank's going to give you the money stage. It's the stage before that. So each lender, a little bit different. Some will have an actual credit assessor have a look at everything, tick, check everything. Others will just do sort of that electronic check and issue what they call a pre-approval or a conditional approval. And they will usually come with, it's approved, but we need this, this, and this, which usually comes down to the valuation of your property, finding a suitable property, and if there's anything else that they still need to check when they go through. So it's that stage before getting the full approval once you've found a property to meet your clauses on your contract of sale. The settlement date, that is the date that everyone looks forward to. Not just you guys buying the home, but everyone here at Mortgage Choice Fortitude Valley and Ashgrove as well. So that is the date that you get to pop the bottle of champagne and celebrate, because the keys are handed to you for your new home. Now, I do remember my first experience with this when my solicitor called me on my settlement day, and he started the conversation with, I have to apologize. And I was like, oh no, don't tell me something's gone wrong with my settlement. I need to be in my house. And he said, you're in a lot of debt. So a little way to lighthearten it. But yeah, it's definitely the most anticipated date that everybody, including your team here at Mortgage Choice, gets behind you and wants to celebrate with you. Now I'm going to go into some of the schemes that are available currently to first home buyers, because there's been a lot of change in the last 12 months. So I guess this comes down to one of the biggest questions we're asked that we have touched on before is, how much do I actually need saved for my deposit? And look, a lot of people out there still aim to try and save that 20%. At the moment, in most cases, with the housing market moving as quickly as it is in an upward trend, trying to save for that 20% is just a forever moving goal. Because as Caroline pointed out earlier, your $500,000 house now that was bought last year is now worth $583,000. So your 20% on 500 is now not enough for $583,000. So you're just going to be continuing to try and save, and you'll be on that little mouse wheel that just keeps going around. There are many different ways that you can acquire your deposit. So aside from the schemes, there's also ways that your family and loved ones can help you. And the biggest one that everybody, especially on the socials, is talking about these days is, let's go to the bank of mum and dad. So ways that the bank of mum and dad can assist you is through gifted funds. So if they're in a position where they've got some cash available that they can gift to you, you can use this in a few different ways. And this is where having the conversation with us comes into play, because we will work out the best structure for you. But you can use it as part of your deposit. You could use it if we needed to pay off some debt that you had to help you be able to afford more of a loan. You know, you may not need it necessarily for the application, but they may gift it to you after settlement so that you can go and buy your furniture, your white goods, your sheets, everything else that you need to move into your home. So there's a few different ways that cash or gifted funds can be used for you. The other one, and this goes back many a year, is a guarantor. So you can look at using family members. With some lenders, it doesn't always have to be your mum and dad. It can be other family members where they can be a guarantor for you. And what this guarantor means is that you can actually get into the market now. So the property of your parents or the guarantor is used as a secondary security to cover the 20% plus costs, which means even if you don't have a cent saved to your name, you could still get into the market now at an 80% loan to value ratio, or LVR, which will also avoid the lender's mortgage insurance, which can sometimes potentially be an additional cost to you.
And you get a better rate.
That is also very true. So, as I said earlier as well, that's another biggest myth. So many people think that they need to have the deposit saved before they even come in and have a chat to anyone. We are not like that. We really, really welcome first home buyers and even second or third home buyers where it may have been a little while since you bought your last home, coming in and having a chat to us, because we will find the best solution if there's a way of thinking outside the box and, you know, getting that scenario to work. We might come up with something that you haven't thought about, or the person you were at the barbecue with talking to hasn't thought about. It's 3 brokers with us at the moment. As I said to someone the other day, you're kind of getting 3 for the price of 1. Mm-hmm. So varying ranges of experience. So, you know, we've got Caroline with plus 10 years. So she's seen nearly every possible solution out there. So if I'm not sure, I can go to her and she'll be like, have you thought about doing it this way? Perfect. So we will all work as a team as well. So you've got a team of brokers behind you, not just the one. Now, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. So the most common, I'm going to talk about the schemes now, which will then lead me into handing over to Matthew. So the most common scheme at the moment for first home buyers is the first home buyer guarantee scheme. So this is a government scheme which will allow you to require a deposit as little as 5% of the purchase price plus costs, which means you can save a massive amount of money in not needing to wait for that 20%. There are some requirements around the scheme. So you do need to be at least 18. There's maximum income amounts on that. So if you're a single person, you can't have earned more than $125,000 on your last tax return. So if you've been given a pay rise this year and last year you were only on 90,000, this year you're on 130, you'll still qualify for the scheme because it's last year's income. Couples is a combined income of 200,000. You can't have owned property previously, needs to be your first home. There is also a scheme for single parents as well, very similar to this scheme. The other great benefit of that is that normally if you're over 80% loan to value ratio, your interest rate can increase significantly because of the increased risk to the lender. Under this scheme, because the government's backing it, you will actually get rates from the lenders that are participating at an 80%. So it is a very, very competitive rate, and it means that those repayments on your new home loan aren't skyrocketing high. With this as well, they did bring in this year that you can actually purchase with a friend. So you don't necessarily need to be in a de facto relationship. You can buy with a friend so long as they also meet the requirements as well. The second scheme that's been around for a long, long time, and the amount seems to change every few years, is the First Homeowner Grant, or what we will refer to as the FOG. So this is, as it states, a grant. So it is a dollar amount that is paid to you. For currently, that amount is $30,000. There are a few more restrictions to the property types that you can purchase using the grant. So they do have to be brand new, never lived in. They can be what they call off the plan. So you are looking at a plan and you're buying something that's not yet built or developed. They you can build your own home, so a house and land package, or it can be a substantially renovated property as well. So that's then never been lived in. So it can't just be someone's replaced the bathroom, but if someone's knocked down a house and pretty much rebuilt it and then never lived in it and you're buying it, you could potentially qualify then for that scheme, the grant as well. The beauty of that grant is that that $30,000 can actually be used as part of your deposit. And that's also a way of helping increase your borrowing capacity. That scheme, well, that dollar figure at the moment is running out, well, potentially changing by the end of the financial year. So you do need to have signed a contract on or before the 30th of June this year. But don't worry, we will keep you updated on all these schemes and whether or not they're coming back, for what amounts, and whether or not any of the terms change. So the next best part about that is that you can actually use both of those schemes together. So you could potentially look at buying brand new or building your own home with as little as 5% deposit plus costs, inclusive of that, and add the $30,000 to it, which will then maximize your borrowing capacity as well. Now, the other things that have recently changed was around the stamp duty and some of the waivers that you actually are entitled to from the government costs that are normally associated with your purchase. So stamp duty used to be one of the biggest costs to first home buyers. And because it's included in your loan amount, it used to take a huge chunk off what you could actually borrow. So now there's no stamp duty up to a $700,000 purchase price, which is a saving of about, I think it's $16,000, massive. And then it is discounted up to an $800,000 purchase price. So that's on established properties. It's then a little bit different when you're looking at just land. But we will delve a lot more into them when you have your meeting with us. So I am now going to hand over to Matthew so that he can go over all of his fabulous stuff.
So probably kick off as well kind of what we do at Funded Futures or financial planners in general. And it's just trying to help you guys align how you're using your money with what you're wanting to achieve. But for today, we're going to be talking about the First Home Super Saver Scheme. But because I am a financial advisor, I have to start with a lovely little disclaimer. I'm going to give you a general advice warning. So today we're going to be talking about the First Home Super Saver Scheme, how to use it, and I'm going to give you some actual examples of clients that we've had use it. However, it is not tailored to your individual circumstances. So be warned, feel free to reach out if you want to have a discussion on how you can use it to help maximize your deposit. So first off, so the First Home Super Saver Scheme has been around since 2018. and all voluntary contributions that you've added into your super fund have counted since the 1st of July 2017. Works a little bit differently to your traditional super fund earnings as well, as it's a deemed rate of return. But what I like about it, it is a really effective way to tax effectively save for your super fund. And I like the fact that it is forced savings, because when you're trying to grow your bank account and you see that, you know, it looks like a house deposit, but it also looks like an overseas holiday, you know, you kind of get a little bit conflicted on what you want to work towards. But today we're going to talk about that first home super saver scheme. So let's start with the eligibility requirements. So you've got to be 18 years old. Now, quite interestingly, this is just for the release. You can start sooner. So once you've got a super fund, you can actually start to contribute towards the first home super saver scheme. And my youngest client that is doing it is actually 3 years old, Joey. Hopefully the scheme doesn't get axed before the time we do the release. You have to be a first home buyer. So it has to be the first time you're ever on a title. So whether it's a freehold, commercial, land only, stuff like that, it has to be the first time you're on the title. You have to be named on the title. So it means that it's got to be in your ordinary name, so not trusts or any other type of entity. You can't have a current release in play. And then finally, you have to live in the house as soon as possible or soon as practical for at least 6 months of the first 12 months, which is also quite similar to the stamp duty rule as well, if I remember correctly. So as I said, it's a tax effective way. And the reason being is we get to salary sacrifice into our super. So when we contribute into super with our pre-tax money, it only pays 15% tax compared to what you would be paying on your marginal tax rate. So if you're earning over 45,000, your marginal tax rate's higher than that salary sacrifice or contribution tax amount. So all of a sudden we're building that little bit of tax arbitrage. The absolute sweet spot is earning over 190,000, but under 250,000. If you want to know why, please reach out. Love to chat to you if you're earning that much. And then when we do the withdrawal, you'll get a 30% offset, but the ATO will do a small withholding if they think that your marginal tax rate is higher than that 30%. And then finally, if you chuck money in and don't claim it as a tax deduction, when you withdraw that out, there's no more taxes imposed. So how does it actually work? And this is probably one of the ones it's common because they have just made it way too confusing. So let's see how I go at explaining it. So we're going to go with the bottom line first. And in this example, we're making 100,000 a year. So we've got a marginal tax rate of 30. Makes it super simple now with stage 3 tax cuts. So of that 100,000, say we've got $10,000 that we're going to be putting towards our house deposit. The ATO immediately take their tax before it gets paid to you in your payslip. So of that 10,000, you lose $3,000 immediately. So of that 10, you're only saving $7,000 towards your house, and then you'll have it in the bank earning maybe 4% if you're lucky. With the Super Saver scheme, we salary sacrifice that $10,000 instead, so it comes out pre-tax. We lose $1,500 to the contribution tax, which I said was 15%. So we've got $8,500 landing in our super fund, ready for our withdrawal. And then finally, when we go to release it to purchase our house, they'll have a look at it. We get that 30% offset. So we will still, in this example, have a little bit more withholding. But what we do, we've ended up picking up an extra $950 towards our deposit. And I know it doesn't seem like much, but you know, if you saw $950 on the ground, would you walk past it? So how does it actually work? And this is probably one of the ones it's common because they have just made it way too confusing. So let's see how I go at explaining it. So we're going to go with the bottom line first. And in this example, we're making 100,000 a year. So we've got a marginal tax rate of 30. Makes it super simple now with stage 3 tax cuts. So of that 100,000, so we've got $10,000 that we're going to be putting towards our house deposit. The ATO immediately take that tax before it gets paid to you in your payslip. So of that 10,000, you lose $3,000 immediately. So of that 10, you're only saving $7,000 towards your house, and then you'll have it in the bank earning maybe 4% if you're lucky. With the Super Saver scheme, we salary sacrifice that $10,000 instead, so it comes out pre-tax. We lose $1,500 to the contribution tax, which I said was 15%. So we've got $8,500 landing in our super fund, ready for our withdrawal. And then finally, when we go to release it to purchase our house, they'll have a look at it. We get that 30% offset. So we will still, in this example, have a little bit more withholding. But what we do, we've ended up picking up an extra $950 towards our deposit. And I know it doesn't seem like much, but you know, if you saw $950 on the ground, would you walk past it? This is actually real clients of ours. So they were looking at purchasing their first house. They had already had a deposit saved, and they caught up with me because they're like, oh, you know, what things do we need to look at when we're purchasing a first house? And I'm like, well, you actually need a mortgage broker for that. For some reason, they come to me. So we did a bit of a budget, but then I also said, have you heard about the first home super saver scheme? And they're like, oh, no, we're ready to buy now. It doesn't apply to us. And I was like, well, what is ready to buy? And we had about a 6-month window. They had 80 grand saved. And I said, okay, well, it's May. How about we each chuck $15,000 into your super fund, so 15 grand each, and we'll claim it as a tax deduction. And then come 1 July, we'll chuck another 15,000 in each, claim it as a tax deduction. And so what had happened when we put that first 15 grand each in and they did their tax return, they each picked up 5,550 in a nice little tax refund, which we could then add towards our house deposit, notwithstanding the fact that we can also do our super release. We did another lump in and claimed it as a tax deduction, but then we bought the house and did the release. So what this means is we didn't get our second tax refund. They have got it now, which means they've got 10 grand that they can purchase furniture with and stuff like that. I think they painted their house is what they did with their money. But what it allows you to do, so if you're thinking, yeah, it's not for me because I'm ready to buy a house, given that we are coming up to the end of the financial year, saying that in February, which is bizarre, we can potentially just do a little bit of a wash using the first home super saver scheme, so you can squeeze a bit more out of your deposit. And this is one that I absolutely love. So if you've worked for the Queensland government, so nurses, medicos, QPS, that sort of thing, you've had your voluntary contribution of 5% that you've had to put away into your superannuation for as long as you've worked there. And the great thing about that is you can use that as your first home super saver scheme release. As I said, contributions are eligible from the 1st of July 2017. So potentially, if you work for a government role, you've actually, unbeknownst to you, started saving for your first deposit. So what I really recommend you guys do is jump onto the ATO website and just grab a determination, and you'll get a guide at the end of this on how to do that. And see if you've actually got some money squared away already that you can release to put towards your first home deposit. So, as I said, the earnings are a deemed rate. So it's calculated on what's called the shortfall interest charge. And so at the moment, that is, it's going to test me now, 7.25%, if I remember correctly. So it is much greater than what you're going to get at the bank. And it is just, as I said, it's a deemed rate. So it doesn't matter what your super fund is doing. Each year, you can contribute up to $15,000 and for a maximum benefit of $50,000. So rewind 4 years ago, it used to only be $30,000 max benefit, but then they realized it's not going to help. So now it's $50,000. And just think, if you're a couple, that means that you can tax effectively wash $100,000. When it comes to the withdrawal, you've got your $50,000 that you contributed less tax, but plus all of that assumed earnings. And the best part about that is the withdrawals are based on FIFO, so first in, first out method. So if you had been contributing since 1 July 2017, you've actually probably got a really nice earnings pool there. And then finally, for our people that lived across the ditch, so the KiwiSavers. So the KiwiSaver is slightly different to our Australian superannuation scheme in the fact that you always have to contribute a little bit and your employer matched it. So with our Trans-Tasman agreement that we have, when you roll your KiwiSaver over to an Australian super fund, it is all treated as a non-concessional contribution. So it's all treated as after-tax money. Now, there are no partial transfers allowed when you bring your money over. So you need to be aware of your non-concessional contribution cap, but also it's only a $15,000 limit per year for the First Home Super Saver scheme release. So, you know, even if you had $100,000 in your KiwiSaver, you're only going to be able to release 15 of that for the First Home Super Saver scheme. And then finally, things to note, or a bit of a word of warning. So your benefits may erode if you have increased your earnings over time. So one of the examples we've got is we've got a doctor who is going through her residency, and each year in your residency, your income jumps up by about $20,000. So the tax rate she started at when we're contributing compared to the tax rate that she's withdrawing on has changed. So it has eroded some of the benefit, but there is still a tax benefit there. And then also be aware that when we do that withdrawal, it does add to your income tax, so it may bump you into the next bracket. Next, super investments are volatile. So it's moving up and down every day. However, the withdrawal value, because it's a deemed rate, isn't. So you've got to be careful if you are making a withdrawal during COVID, you are doing substantial impact to your retirement savings. Whereas now, you know, deemed rate 7.25, you know, most super funds did around 11% last year. So, you know, it's kind of a bit of a win, but we can't predict the future. You must complete your determination before putting an offer in our house. So before you sign a contract, you need to have jumped into the ATO website and requested your determination. I cannot stress how important that is. Next, your determination is probably wrong. I say probably, I guarantee that it is wrong. So that is why we've actually created a guide on how to check the determination to make sure it's correct. The reason why it is because there's delays in super fund reporting. They don't report if you've made a tax deduction on a non-concessional contribution and all those sorts of things. And then finally, once you've requested that withdrawal, don't stress. You've got 12 months to purchase your house before you have to request the extension. That's it. Hope that makes sense.
Great.
Cool. That was, I actually learned a few things there.
Well, thanks everyone for attending tonight. One thing we wanted to touch on was the importance of building your support team. Now, your support team includes your mortgage broker and lending team, your solicitor, so they can help you through the contract and advise you on what conditions you need to put in there, advise you on the terms of the contract and anything else you need to add as an additional clause. Your financial planner, because they'll guide you as to how to best use your money and if it's the right time to buy a property and based on your overall plan. Now, your pest and building inspector, we would be able to recommend the guys we work with because that's part of your contract of sale. So when you make an offer, you usually make it subject to finance and subject to building and pest inspection, along with whatever other clauses your solicitor recommends. So your pest and building is important because if you put it as a condition, If you find something wrong with the property, you are able to withdraw from the contract under that clause. Something else is important that you budget for is your insurance. So after you've settled on the property, you'll need to have insurance cover for your home and contents. So for example, if it burns down, God forbid, you are insured because it's probably one of the biggest assets you'll ever acquire, which is your owner-occupied home. You want to make sure you protect your assets. You would usually protect your car or your health. It's even more important that you protect your home. And also relying on your family and friends. A lot of them have probably bought a property before, some of them in the 80s, and although they'll have a lot of advice for you, it is probably quite a long time since they've actually got a home loan, applied for a home loan, and the environment has certainly changed. So whilst taking their advice, make sure that you get current and professional advice as well.
Can I also just touch on the general insurance, so your home and contents? So for those that are attending in Queensland and intending to buy in Queensland, it's actually law that you do need to get building insurance in place as soon as or within 24 hours of signing your contract. So on the off chance your solicitor or conveyancer forgets to let you know that, just keep that in the back of your mind. We'll touch on that though when we're going over the meeting and what you need to do in your next steps anyway.
Now, Renee, I'll let you answer the question that's come through. The First Home Guarantee Scheme and the $30,000 First Home Buyers Grant have property price caps, which can vary between states. Could you tell us more about the caps that apply?
Yep, that's going to test me. I do know the Queensland ones, but I do always have to refer to my sheet for the other states. This is probably one of the conflictions between if you did want to use both the First Home Guarantee Scheme and the First Homeowner Grant together. So the property cap in Queensland on your properties under the Home Guarantee Scheme is a $700K purchase price. And under the First Homeowner Grant, it's a $750K less than seven. They've recently changed the wording on the government website. I think they got caught out a few times. So it is less than $750,000. So if you wanted to use both together, you would be capped at a $700K purchase price. But if you were just building on your own, you could go to the $749,999.
Get that dollar discount. Yes. Now I'll do one more question, and that is, how do I know if a property is fairly priced? Now, it can feel like a minefield when you're going in to start looking at properties and figuring out, am I paying the right price? Now, it's market value is determined by what people are prepared to pay for a property. So as a rule, I would suggest start looking for properties in the same area with the same attributes and compare them. So if you walk into the first property and you're looking at a 3-bed, 1-bath house in, let's say, Brackenridge, for example, valued at $700,000, or they're asking $700,000 for it. You look around and you're like, okay, well, this is what the benchmark I'll set. Then you go into the second property in the same suburb, if you can, with similar attributes. And you walk in and you say, well, actually, they're asking for $730,000 for this, but it's heaps better. And then you set yourself a new benchmark. Now, by the time you've walked into that fourth property, you won't even need to see a price on the advertisement. You'll be able to look at what the positioning is, the age of the property, the condition of the property, the aspect, if it's bigger or smaller, the land size. So there's a lot of different contributing factors. But there is also a way we can help as well. We use RP data and CoreLogic. So these are two different valuation platforms with referring to different information that is data-driven valuations. So we can provide these property reports as a guide, but you will know the right price to pay once you've looked at 4 properties with similar attributes. So it comes down to market value. Now, go in confidently to buy the property with the research and with the information. You can jump onto realestate.com.au and look at the sold section to get an idea of what other properties in the area are selling for. Generally, you look at the last 90 days sales. Anything beyond that, the information's probably a little aged. Now, I know that we've gone over time, so I'll wind this up. I want to thank you, Matthew from Funded Futures. Thanks enormously for coming along today to teach us about the First Home Super Saver Scheme and a little bit about financial planning. Our very wise Renee, thanks so much. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one, where we will talk about investment properties. We will talk about self-managed super funds, upgrading, and many other things. So see you next time around.
See you later.